to be back.
Listen to that.
By the way, did you see Pro Bowl rosters just came out?
I did not. How many Bears?
One. Take a guess.
Is it Tory Taylor?
No.
Oh, God.
That would have been an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
It is not. Do you want to take a guess? It shouldn't be hard.
Is it Jalen Johnson?
Yeah, it's Jalen Johnson. It's the only one at the cornerback. So the four corners are J.C. Horn, Jalen Johnson, Byron Murphy, and Devin Weatherspoon. And then, Minnesota's got a bunch of players. Philly obviously has a bunch. I think they lead in the NFC ranks. The quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels, Sam Darnold, and Jared Goff.
Man, I tell you what.
Sounds right.
I think that's going to be great. Jalen Johnson's going to be great in that flag football game. It's going to be awesome.
Can we I'm going to turn this into a shot or no shot. You're 3 years in. You have one Pro Bowler 3 years in as a general manager. Shot or no shot? This is yet another reason they need to move on. One Pro Bowler 3 years in.
That would be a reason, yes. That would be a reason to move on because that's also how you're measured. Not just the one-loss record, not just your draft, not just your free agency. Now, if you're getting better, getting sideways or worse. But who are your all-pros? I ask this all the time, Courtney. Like, who are your cornerstone players? That's one of them you just mentioned, Johnson.
Oh, I don't think he's going to make All-Pro this year, though.
You're gonna have 0 All-Pros and 1 Pro Bowler in the third year of a general manager.
Mm-hmm. It's not a good look any way around. I think and we talked to Jalen about this yesterday. He was kind of skeptical about it, just thinking, hey, I'm not getting targeted that much. A lot of times when it is the Pro Bowl, and we know how much the whole NFL top 100 really bothered him because
yes, I remember that.
When you're not targeted that much, people don't know your name. And it's not a reflection of bad play. It's just that, the stats will show you sometimes it's better to dirt the ball than throw it in Jalen Johnson's direction. But that being said, it's still not a great look that there's no Montez Sweat, none of the linebackers that you paid top dollar for when you brought both of them in, no receivers. Not good.
And a rookie quarterback that wasn't the one you took number 1 overall.
That wasn't the one that you did any research on.
Bingo.
They didn't bring him in the building.
Yeah.
They didn't have any visits with him, had nothing set up with him.
I said this with Tyler the other day. I'm cool in the process that you didn't want to talk to other quarterbacks because you knew what you were doing. Like, you knew you were selecting Caleb Williams. There was no world where you weren't. So I get why they didn't talk to anybody. The rub on that is, though, you have to be right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have to be right. And I think that in obviously year 1, not so good. Year 2, year 3, year 4, we're going to see. What I'm seeing now, I don't expect to see in 3 years. Now with Caleb Williams, I can't speak for the organization, but Caleb Williams, you've seen the flashes.
Stupid.
I understand. I understand. But that says a lot. And by the way, shot or no shot, Jalen Johnson being selected is a reputation pick.
Partially. I think so.
The
I
guy
think
that you
partially.
know. The guy that you know that you don't throw that side. Yep.
And the Pro Bowl is based on that thing. Obviously, based on recognition, brand name recognition. Players who, I don't know, you think of the top cornerbacks in the NFL right now, who you're going off of names. Let me pull that list up again to see, on the NFC side. I know I said Weatherspoon.
Yeah.
Who else did I mention? Weatherspoon, Byron Murphy, J.C. Horn.
Mm-hmm.
The names, honestly, for that position are in the AFC. Because their roster has Marlon Humphrey, Derek Stingley Jr., Pat Surtain, and then Denzel Ward. Those are bigger names.
Strong.
But it's not that Jalen's not deserving. It's just a glaring thing when you've seen how many Pro Bowl selections they had last year when Sweat gets here at the midway point of the season and then gets it, and now to see kind of where the production has fallen off. DJ Moore's never been selected to the Pro Bowl.
And that's deserved.
But isn't that wild when you think about it?
Yeah.
How consistent he was
Yeah.
in Carolina with bad quarterback play, and he's still putting up 4,000-yard seasons. What he does last year doesn't get it. And
Nope.
obviously this year it's kind of null and void because of how the season's gone. But that one has always just kind of been wow to me.
He's Zach LaVine in football cleats. That's what he is.
It's a good comparison.
Just a good player, but just, it's what it is.
This town has so many Zach Levines.
Charlie.
Your right tackle you drafted 10th overall can't even sniff it.
Darnell Wright.
It's hard for an offensive lineman, though.
I know it's hard. I know it's hard for an offensive lineman, but when you draft a guy top 10 and you're this is his second year, and the fact that I don't think anybody had any sort of idea that he or any illusions that he would be in. again, like it's just another miss at a high leverage pick.
Yeah.
Shane Orley.
It all, I mean.
I know.
And honestly, Courtney, I don't know if you disagree. Quinyon Mitchell probably should have gotten Jalen Johnson's spot.
He's had a really good season.
He's been awesome in Philly.
But it was the old NBA All-Star game or Major League Baseball game,
Yeah.
All-Star game. Hey, I know that guy. That guy, they don't throw to him. He's good.
You're saying Jalen Johnson's getting the Miguel Cabrera, Albert Pujols spot in the All-Star game.
He's Ozzie Smith. He does a backflip, put him in the All-Star game. That's what it is.
All right, I have another Ryan Poles question because yesterday there was a rumor from a guy named Charlie Campbell of Walter Football that just caught fire on social media. I had a guy calling me about it in the first hour. This guy, Charlie Campbell, claims he has heard that Ryan Poles is trying to keep the Bears away from Ben Johnson because Ben Johnson wants the job, but Ryan Poles is worried that Ben Johnson would want him out. That would be concern number one. The rumor goes on, Poles prefers to hire Brian Flores because he's worked with Brian Flores previously. Shot or no shot? If Ryan Poles is making head coach decisions based on his own job security, then he shouldn't be making the head coach decisions at all.
Oh, that's a shot. That's a shot. It should be based on who's best for the organization. You know you need discipline. You had Mr. Friendly in there and Matt Eberflus, and that's fine. But that was an A to B coach, Courtney. He was not going to last here because of where the roster was in the direction of the organization. Eberflus was never going to be here long term. I knew that when they hired him. That's not a name that was hot in the streets. And I know why he's Rick Renneria. That's why he was here. Now you're looking for a head coach to get you to the next level. Now it's B to C. Brian Flores is on my list as a guy that should be the head coach of this football team. Discipline-wise, getting a second opportunity, knows the lay of the land as a former head coach, and I think that he can be able to straighten the waters out in that locker room. But, no, that's not the reason why that you hire someone. If I hire this guy, then I can save my job. Well, that's not good.
Well, where did he work with him is my question. Just because of the Patriots' influence and there's the Scott Piol? Like, where did that come from? Because they've not worked together. Poles was in Kansas City his entire career, and before that he was at Boston College. And
I think it was at BC.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that would make sense. But I think the time, I honestly don't know, like, the overlap. But, like, to the point of he wouldn't hire somebody that's going to fire him. No kidding. Like, what is it supposed to be, like the Mike McCagnon situation with the Jets and Adam Gase? Like, that seems like that would be seems pretty awful.
Yeah.
Using that as a base point of comparison here, but I don't see him hiring somebody that's going to fire him. And so, to your point, I'll agree with Hoodie. I think that's a shot. I think that's absolutely a shot. That if you are making the pick that's going to keep you around. But like everybody's going to do that. You can't. Nobody would hire somebody that's going to fire him. You would just resign at that point.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
But that's where it becomes a problem. If it's true for me that you're allowing him to make this decision because you're going to let him hire a candidate who, look, if you interview all these people and you come away and go, Brian Flores is clearly the best guy, that's one thing. But if you interview all these people and you go, this Ben Johnson, boy, he's got a good head on his shoulders, but I think he's going to get me fired, I got to go with Brian Flores, who maybe isn't as good of a candidate, but he's not going to get me fired. That's the risk you run letting a lame duck GM do this.
Unless he gets a contract extension, which
what has he done to earn that?
I know, but I mean, that would be the safety pick that you have, again, bringing in a GM, bringing in a head coach that might want to be with a different GM. Here's my thing I don't really understand. And it's no slight against Ben Johnson, but like, where do we get off thinking that this guy gets carte blanche to make every decision when he hasn't proven anything? He's never been a head coach before. I know he was the hottest name the last cycle. I get that. But, like, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell weren't like the bestest of friends when they were both hired in Detroit together at the same time. I'm like just kind of like miffed by the fact that like, the whole idea that Ben Johnson he's the only candidate, and this has been reported before, that he'd be the one who gets the exception to, like, if we hire you and you want to bring in your own GM, that's fine. You can do that. If it's anybody else that Ryan Poles is staying, that's the perception that's out there. I don't know if Breer reported that or somebody did.
Yeah, that feels right.
And so that's the thing I don't really understand. Sean McVay didn't handpick his general manager. I've got like the list right here. Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell were a pairing that was put together by the Minnesota Vikings. It wasn't because I think if memory serves from when I was up there, I think it was the GM first and then the head coach.
The way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. You know who were actually friends? Like, and how? Tell me how this has worked out. Brian Dable and Joe Shane.
Oops.
Oh,
In New
boy.
York.
Yeah,
They
that's
were
tough.
boys from Buffalo. So it doesn't always mean that if you get to be, handpicked, like if it's an arranged marriage can work. It can. But it also, just because you're friends with somebody, just because you have a good relationship, because you worked somewhere together in the past or somebody's your handpicked guy, doesn't mean that it's going to pan out. I just don't understand like why we look at, there's examples of this where it's worked before, where they haven't been necessarily from the same tree or from the same, background, and it's been fine. I mean, Detroit's the prime example of that.
I think this should not be a bold declarative statement, but I believe this is going to happen, Courtney. Whoever is going to be the next head coach, he's going to get fired at some point, whoever the next head coach is. And Poles will stay as general manager. He will have a second coach to work with. They will both be fired at the same time. That's not a prediction. That's a spoiler. That's what's going to happen.
Well, I mean,
here.
that's typically what does.
I think we need to say it out loud because this whole perception of, well, if it doesn't work out next year, whoever the head coach is, that Poles is going to be fired next year. That's not happening with the Chicago Bears. I'm just going by, not because of my gut feeling, I'm going by the Chicago Bears and the way they do business. Mm-hmm. Just remember, people point at Kevin Warren, they point at all the stuff that's adjacent to Kevin Warren, and then look down the depth chart. Look at the top of the depth chart. The top of the depth chart is George McCaskey. And the way the McCaskies do business, there's not going to be Bears underachieving and then Poles that gets fired next year. That's not what's happening. Mm-hmm. The head coach and the general manager are going to be aligned. Now, I don't know how many years that Poles will be extended, but he will be. Shay, you are correct, because you could take a look at the resume of Ryan Poles as general manager. The drafts, the free agency. It has not worked. It has not worked. This is supposed to be year 3 where it's supposed to turn around. You tanked for a reason. You got Caleb Williams, you got DJ Moore. And now you're looking at this team and nothing is working to get this team to get right. And by the way, next year, I'm down on the Bears next year too. No matter how much cap space they have, no matter how many free agency picks they have or the draft, Courtney, this is not going to get turned in a year. It won't.
No, it's a multiple year process.
Right.
So you're back. It's not a full rebuild again,
No, it's not.
But it still feels like you're starting over. Like it's like, where are the levers right now? The lever for like talent, you got the quarterback. You think you have like some of the pieces that you want to utilize to build around the quarterback, but like that lever's here. And then head coach, you're taking a step, you're pushing that lever down, but because you have to build it back up. And it never all they don't all continue to climb at the same time. I don't know how to like give you a metaphor for that.
It's not the quick NBA build where you can get a draft pick, add a free agent, and now you're in the top 8 or 9 in the playoff. It's just that's not how this works. The reason why I know that is because I watched the Detroit Lions and how this thing was built, how people wanted Dan Campbell out the door at the second season saying, boy, this guy, this meatball, this team can't turn. And then look how they built their lines. Look how they're able to build that team to where they are right now, a powerhouse in the NFC. So when I look at this thing, look, I think that Poles is going to stay as general manager. That's one. He'll have his head coach in place, but they're both going to get fired at some point if they can't get this turned in a couple years. They're not going to the playoffs next year, the Bears. They're not, because there's too many holes. There's holes coming into this season.
Yeah.
What about this offseason? You still have holes. There's going to be guys on this roster that are not going to be here next year, a number of them, and some are starters, I believe.
Who would you say, it's my question, like of the starters, of the guys that you think are cornerstones of this franchise, who's the surprise player right now that you think is not going to be on the roster next year?
Not sure how Tyreek Stevenson comes back next year.
Mm-hmm.
And that just comes from a culture fit, and I just feel like his career has gone backwards since Washington.
And that's a second-round pick for who?
Yep.
It's again for me, and Hoodie, I know what you're saying is right, and I know in my heart they're going to extend him and he's going to be here. I just think it's unbelievably reckless. Because look, you can fire him a year early or you can fire him 3 years late. That's basically what you're setting up. and I'll root for him if he gets the extension and he's here, and I hope he gets it turned around, and I hope he hires a head coach, and they have a wonderful marriage, and they figure this out with the quarterback, and the team starts winning games. But, man, am I just terrified. You're going to extend this guy, and 3 years later it'll be the same place we're sitting now, and you could have fired him now, and instead you'll do what you did with Eberflus. You're going to fire him late.
It's not a prediction. It's a spoiler. That's what's going to happen. I've just been around here too long to see how the Bears operate. I understand what you're saying, but I just think, Courtney, just to your question, there's going to be some hard decisions that have to be made, and you're going to have to be able to supplement some of this talent and put some new faces in there, because you need not just players, not just hard hitters, not just productive players. You need some guys that are culture fits, because that matters too.
And building a culture, like that's the whole idea of the Pete Carroll thing, why Bill Belichick, in my opinion, was never – maybe they should have reached out to him. I get that. People are going to get upset about them, but why it was never a realistic possibility. You know, it takes years to build culture. Like, it's not a one-year thing. That's, I guess, to your point about like the NBA stuff and being able to jumpstart a roster. I mean, in 1 year, you're not going to be the 1 seed, but you might be the 8. You might be a play-in, like in play-in territory. It's going to take them some time to get the player fit, but also like a coach takes a year to install culture. It'll be different this time around because they're not going to be having to do it during a full teardown.
Right.
Like that's what I mean, honestly, to the challenge that Matt Eberflus faced in that first 3-14 year, to have to get guys to buy in knowing that they're there on a team that is set up to fail, that's difficult. But it's not going to be that this time around, meaning it won't take as long, but it's still going to take a season to get your identity and make the identity different than what it was these last 3 years. And pivoting takes time. Pivoting ideology. For Ryan Poles, if assuming he is retained and remains the general manager here, there's going to be things that he's going to have to do from a philosophical standpoint that are different than the first 3 years of his career in Chicago. And that may not manifest itself in the free agency decisions that you hope that the team makes and what they do in the draft. And that could be 2026 by the time you're like, okay, these two are on the same page. Because usually head coach and general manager, when they don't come in at the same time, one's ahead naturally. Whoever was there first is ahead, and they've got their way of doing things. And then a head coach comes in with, or general manager, whichever the other one is, with new ideas, with fresh perspective. Yeah. And to get on the same page, hell, it took 18 weeks of the season for the receivers and the quarterbacks to get on the same page, which they've never been on.
Right.
Can you imagine how long it's going to take for something that is quite frankly more substantial and building an entire team out?
It is just if it gels in 1 year, you can't replicate it the next year. Ask Houston. Ask the Houston Texans if that's the case. I mean, a good football team, but not the same dynamic team we saw last year. There's going to be ebbs and flows. You just hope to hold on to be a perennial playoff team. That's what you want. Just hold on if you can.